The views and opinions expressed on the Craig L. Hayes Show do not necessarily reflect those of Westgate Resort ownership or management. And now, on with the show.
Extra, extra, read all about it. Get your copies while they last. Stop the presses.
And now for something completely different.
Are you ready for a little truth? Are we not entertained? Wisdom is the proper use of knowledge and experience. There are no safe spaces here. The truth shall make you free. It's showtime! So you want the truth, but can you handle the truth? Well, here's another fine mess you've gotten us into. Now that's entertainment. Enlighten me a little. What you say is quite logical. And what did we learn? Prepare yourself for a little sensory overload. I came here for the truth. 47 years ago, stand by the roll show intro. Roll show intro in 3, 2, 1, go.
This is the Craig L. Hayes Show.
Hello, America, family, friends, and listeners all around this planet we call home. This is the Craig L. Hayes Show. I am Craig L. Hayes. It is the 16th of December, 2024. And we're going to continue on with our interviews with people in show business and past friends and anybody I can talk into coming on the show and drag them in here with threat of violence. And I've got one of those people today. Actually, I didn't have to threaten him too much. He's probably my best friend, been around a long time. But we are recording this here at the Westgate Resort Las Vegas in the International Showroom and Elvis Presley's former dressing room down in the basement of the showroom. And we've been given special permission to do this show, and I am so grateful to Cammie Christensen, the president of the hotel, and Don Rawl, the vice president of entertainment and marketing, and John Peer, the director of entertainment, for allowing me to do this show and record some of the history of Las Vegas and all the stuff that we've done over the years and different experiences. It's kind of like we're trying to store the history of so many great shows in the past and present. And I think it's very valuable. So today's going to be another show with someone we did last month. His name is Talbot Snow. He's been my partner as far as business and best friend for 44 years, as we talked last time. And we're going to talk a little bit about the work we've done in the past from, 1990, basically moving forward. You know, our first 4 interviews. Before I welcome back to the show, Talbot.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Hey, in the last show, I know it's kind of hard to believe, but we did 4 episodes.
Yeah, I was seeing that. I was checking that out just now on YouTube.
And we did 10 years. All we talked about was like the first 10 years of us working together and doing stuff, you know.
And even then, we probably didn't touch on everything, you know.
No, we did. We didn't touch on a whole lot of stuff. We touched on a lot of stuff.
Yeah, we left out the part where you and I were in jail and
That prison time, yeah.
And we were down in South America, you know.
Running arms to the Nicaragua Contras. Yeah, in that time.
That part we left out.
We left all that stuff out because, nobody needs to know about that. That's the bad stuff in our past. Good thing we have a lawyer as our other best friend here. So, yeah. But, we got to about 1990, roughly 1989, 90, right in that timetable.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was a little bit earlier than that we actually started building the studio.
Yep.
I was looking at things. I think it was somewhere around like 88.
Yep. Yep.
We
it was.
started building the studio. I kept on thinking it was 90, but it was actually, like I say, 1988, 89. So it was a little bit earlier than that.
Yep.
And we started putting the studio together. We still had all the sound gear from doing the DJ system and stuff like that. Boy, that was a lot of gear we had.
Yeah. CAS/AMP, we called it.
Yeah. And now it's just DJ Snowman.
I remember you. I remember waking up one day because that room that we used to store the sound equipment was also, it used to be a garage. Then you remember Bishop Peterson helped convert that thing into a more of a room. He being a carpenter and all, and then but it also doubled as my bedroom and a band practice room. 'Cause sometimes I would have various band instruments in there, and then also a DJ sound equipment storage room. And so it was many things. It was a 2-car garage. And then, but I remember, so I would sleep in there. I had this, I don't know if you remember, I had this giant fat sack thing I would sleep on. And you came over, I think it was a Saturday morning. We had already talked about this and planned this, and you already had a plan in your head, because you're that guy that builds things. And I hear a knock on the door pretty much, and you come in, and you're ready to build a wall. I don't know if you remember that. And you had, I think we had ordered some supplies from somewhere, who knows where, and we had a bit of a budget to change the room even further. It had already been sheetrocked, and we had some treatments on the ceiling. There was acoustic ceiling and this and that, but we were going to take it one more step further, and you came in and we started putting up a dividing wall, and you knew how to do all that. Do you remember that?
Yep, I do.
And so you were hammering away with 2x4s, and I was just basically, telling, or not telling, but following whatever you said. Like I say, you're the guy that builds things like that, and I kind of just follow along. And before I knew it, that day we had a bit of a wall up in the middle of the room, which became the 2 rooms. One was the mic room, the other was the mixing room, pretty much.
Yep.
And that wall, we left a hole for a door, and a big hole for a window. Remember?
Yep.
And we put double paned glass in that giant window. One side was slightly angled because we thought that was a cool thing to do. Well, we've seen it in other studios.
Well, you didn't want to have direct reflective on hard surfaces, so you had to,
Right. And Quentin also, you remember him? He helped out building that and painting that, and then we bought a bunch of carpet remnants from Carpet Barn, I think it was.
Yeah.
And we started putting that up on the walls. We put carpet down on the floor. We did a lot of it ourselves. I remember we put the glue, right, directly onto the concrete, and then the carpet on top of that.
Mm-hmm.
Is that sort of that very, what do you call it, thin industrial type carpet.
Yep.
Gray carpet for the floor. And then we had some more shaggy, a little bit more thicker carpet on the walls, still grayish, plus this dividing wall. And then on the 2 outer walls, we had the album covers we put up, which looked cool, and I guess it was kind of sound absorbent. Kind of, sort of.
Kind of, not really, but,
And then I remember in what was the mix room to begin with had its own AC unit stuck in a hole in the wall, one of those wall units, so we could have AC when it was in the middle of a Las Vegas summer.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think we also, yes, we did build a kind of a squarish foam, what do you call it?
It was just a sound absorption
Yeah.
panel is what it was. It was, you know, it just behind the mix position, so it would just kind of die instead of reflecting all over the place,
Yep.
you know, from the mix position. So,
Yep. And you got some tower, that big steel tower from somewhere. I don't know where you got it from. That was where we were able to rack mount a lot of our stuff. I think you got that from some.
from the Sahara, if I remember right. Yeah.
So we put a lot
Or
of
maybe
our,
it was a Riviera, one of the two, you know.
yeah. And then we built a table that had the mixer on sitting on top, right?
Yep.
And that was a good sturdy table, and we had some, you know, speakers, and we had our multi-track unit that we got from the drum shop, the MS-16.
Old Mahoney's.
Yeah, the reel-to-reel unit, 16-track, which we thought was Christmas.
It was. Boy, we sure felt good taking all that back to the place and starting to set it up, and hundreds of cables later, patching and repatching and unpatching. Ugh.
It's so funny, right? We just sort of just dived in. I remember you and I both, we used to kind of oogle over magazines, trade magazines of, you know, recording studio trade magazines. Like, ooh, look at this studio in L.A. and this one in New York and this one. So we had our heads full of what studios could look like,
Yeah.
plus some of the studios we'd seen here in town. And we were going to try and do something similar, you know, but with our own flair, our own touch. I remember one of my touches, which I don't know if you were crazy about it, but I had this, what the heck do you call it? It was a glass fiber plant kind of a thing that had all these really pretty colors. And I put it on top of the tower. It was like kind of a modern, it was a thing that used to be quite popular back in the day. It was glass fiber something or rather, you know, bouquet. It wasn't flowers. It was just looked like a big, you know, ball of hair that had colors that would sweep through. I don't know if you remember that or not.
Yeah. Yeah. It was just a fiber optic little
Yeah.
light thing. So
I thought it looked modern. You know, for me at the time, I was like, yeah, that's cool. You know, stick it in there, give the studio a little bit of character beyond just equipment only. And that was the whole point of the album covers too. It kind of gave it a very, so that, you know, the wall behind the mixer guy and the wall over in the mic room area had album covers from the last, you know, from the 80s, mostly the 80s and 90s, I think. Well, actually, it wasn't 90s yet, so it couldn't have been 90s.
yeah.
It was albums from the 80s.
Yeah, it was all Michael Jackson and U2 and all those other guys. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was all great albums.
Oh, yeah. Every one of the albums on the wall were one of our prized possessions from doing all the DJs stuff that we did. So.
Yep, and they were inspiring, you know, because we looked up to some of those groups, a lot of those groups.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
And I think it was good to have a visual thing, you know, because we're musicians and whatnot are creative people. They like to see things as well as hear things, and so that was cool. And then we had that other little funky little mic booth that we, in the other, you know, in the mic room.
Yep.
It was a little isolation booth.
Yep.
That was kind of it was also doubled as a second exit out of the room, mic room into my folks' laundry.
Yeah.
Laundry area.
You know, we made it work, though.
We did. And there again, you know, I think we touched base on this in one of the last episodes, how my folks put up with all this, you know. They'd already put up with, you know, bands and DJs and things in their living room,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and sound systems that dominated their entire living room. And now we had taken over the garage, which they weren't really using. It was just an empty black hole when I moved into it. You know, they never used it much, except to store a few odds and ends. And So we moved in there, and suddenly, they had a studio in there, and they kind of just went along with it, rolled right along. Good old mom and dad, mom and dad. It was very, very cool, and I think they were very, very cool. Maybe they didn't think it was so cool. Maybe they were just putting up with it.
I think they probably looked at it as, well, if we don't put up with this stuff, then he's going to go out and steal cars or something,
Yeah, right. Well, that was my point. I think I made a couple episodes
Yeah.
back that we had a lot of creative energy. We didn't have music. I mean, we already got in trouble as it was, even with music. But without music, we would have got into a whole lot more trouble.
Yeah.
All that energy has to go somewhere.
Yeah, you got to put your creativity, whether it's into music or to breaking into, a vault or something like that. So you have, parents had a choice. Did you want us taking and robbing Fort Knox or making music?
Yeah.
That's, and it's totally up to them. Do they want criminals as kids, or do they?
Exactly. And I mean, a lot of kids didn't necessarily have things to do always, unless they had a job or something after school, which not all of the kids did. And so you came home and did what? A little bit of homework, and then what? So this gave us something to do beyond school, and then getting out of school, it gave us something to do outside of our regular jobs. Because back then we all had regular jobs. I had some real, I call them stepping stone, piecemeal jobs, just getting by type jobs that I didn't like.
Yeah.
And I couldn't wait to get home from work, whatever I was doing, and get back into the studio.
Yep.
Which we built. And man, it's interesting because I remember there were people around us. Some, there were a couple, 2 or 3 that were kind of encouraging, but there were probably more that were sort of like, "What are you guys doing? Are you nuts? Are you, you have no business getting into into the studio business.
Yeah.
You don't know what you're doing. You're not connected. You haven't been educated in this area." Even my folks would say a little bit of that sometimes, like, "What are you doing, Talbot? Like, are you sure this is, what you want to do? Is this a good thing?" But my poor old dad, he was, at the time, I think I touched on this again before, that he had the wind in his sails knocked out 2 or 3 times in a big way in his life. And by this time, he was kind of sort of winding down. We were his second family. My mother was his second wife, so he was much older than everybody else. And, so he was kind of looking at retirement and such as it was. And it was tough for him, because he was in a new country, far away from his home country. He didn't have full benefits here because he moved here late in life. So he was limited, financially. And so he kind of just had the attitude, "I'll just go along with it, go along for the ride, whatever Talbot wants to do. We'll just..."
Yeah, I'm old and tired. Yeah, go do whatever you want.
Yeah. Let me watch my news.
Maybe watch Benny Hill and laugh, and you guys just do whatever.
Yeah. Let me. I tell you, here's a funny thing. Okay, back in high school, I quit high school. Right. One day I was supposed to go back. This is probably, I don't know, 82-ish, maybe. And I went to my first day back to the new semester to high school, and I realized right then and there I didn't want to go anymore. So I quit the first day of high school of the new year, my senior year, I think it was. I just walked home and told Dad, "Yep, I don't want to do it. I don't want to go to school anymore. That's that." And Dad said, "Oh, that's nice, Talby. Do you mind? I'm watching my news right now." That was the that was the whole input for my, career guidance. education guidance. And, my dad didn't get past, I think, he had very little schooling. So school wasn't a big deal for him. And my mom was busy being a nurse at Sunrise Hospital, and they kind of, were working her to death. So she was busy with that. And so I quit school for about a year and tried going and being an apprentice at a sign writing store, a shop, where they used to paint signs.
Mm-hmm.
And tried that out for a while and tried a couple other things. It didn't work out. So then I went back to school, back to Valley High School. My mom and dad and I sat down with the principal and said, he changed his mind. He'd like to come back. And the principal said, okay. And because I was already ahead of my age group or class anyway, because of the education system in New Zealand was a little bit more accelerated than Valley High School.
That's not hard to believe at all. No.
So I was able to go back in and still be with my age group and graduated properly. So skipped a year, went back, and graduated by the skin of my teeth.
Yeah, well, I pretty much barely graduated myself, so I know exactly what you're saying about that.
Yeah.
I didn't like high school. We've talked about that before. I didn't like high school, and I just did what was necessary so I could get out.
Yep. Yeah, and all of this time, there was the DJ stuff going on and some bands, local garage band type things, and then this studio thing. Well, I'm jumping around a little bit. Of course, I went on a mission.
Yep.
And then came back, and then the whole studio thing started coming together.
When you got home from your mission, that's when while you're out on your mission, that's when you got the SQ1, the Ensoniq thing, and started playing with it. And then we went down and we tried a couple of studios. I remember DLR was one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when we went, instead of paying these guys, why don't we just get our own?
Yep. Yeah, we tried a couple, 2 or 3 studios in town, and we got okay recordings. They were pretty good. But I also knew that I wanted our recordings to have a lot more time and detail and production attention put into them than what these guys would do or could do, or that we could afford to do. And so it made sense to look at trying to get our own studio. I had messed around with some multi-track stuff, just using cassettes and cassette decks, which is not real multi-track.
No.
But and then the keyboard thing you mentioned. Somewhere in the mid '80s, the standard keyboards that the average musician could barely afford started coming with sequencers in them.
Yep.
That could remember what you played, and you could program so many bars and put sequences together and create songs, multi-track songs coming off of the digital sounds within the keyboard. And that first keyboard, the ESQ1 Ensoniq, I actually acquired that on my mission. While out on my mission, I already had a Juno 60, which is quite a famous Roland keyboard. And I left all that behind. Left all my music, girlfriend, everything behind to go on a mission. While out on a mission, I got into the good graces of my president. I was, considered a good missionary and doing things and having some success. So I asked him, could I please get my keyboard sent out to me, and I'll play it for people? And he amazingly said yes. So I called my mom, and she sent that Juno 60 and my drum machine out to me, via UPS or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I started using that on my mission, and I would plug it into people's stereos in their homes and give them a little mini, concert. Just live playing. Here's the drum machine, hit play, basic beat, and play a few things manually. But then I ran into a lady, her name was Sister Rose. She was like my mom away from home. And make a long story short, she agreed to finance a new keyboard for me. But I had to sell the one I had first and put that money toward it. It was $1,500, and I was able to sell my Juno 60, I think, for almost $800 or $900, I think, and she financed the rest. And then I was to pay her back, like $50 a month or something. And so suddenly I had this. Well, for the time, it was kind of a state-of-the-art keyboard.
Oh, yeah.
And I had that on my mission, and I was creating music with that and getting familiar with the sequencing idea and technique. And so by the time I got home, I had it with me, and I was familiar with that process. And so that facilitated multi-tracking in a sense. It wasn't true multi-tracking because it was sequencing within the keyboard. But, and you could MIDI it up to, drum machines and other things that made it sound cooler and better and fuller. And that gradually, also led into us getting a studio.
Yep. Yeah, that's I think the one that really made it so that I was like, we're spending money in these places, and they're getting okay stuff, but we're not getting what we really can get out of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was either Light a Candle or Dream Girl, one of those two. And we did it at DLR, and we got a couple tracks down. We're listening to it, going, yeah, but it's just a basic recording. I know we hadn't put everything on it, but it was one of those. We'd spent a couple hours there, and that was $100 gone.
Yeah. Yep.
We're like, well, we could get the money and put this together, and we could spend all day long on it if we wanted to.
Right.
Still spend the same amount of money instead of spending $100 in a couple hours. Because most of the studios then were $35 an hour, $40 an hour, something like that.
Yeah. So we'd go the shortcut of just borrowing, $20,000 and learning how to do something that we didn't know how to do.
Yeah.
That's we'll just go this other way.
Well, live audio was easy for me because that's I was doing sound all over town on shows and stuff like that. So live audio was no big deal. Now the recording stuff, it took a little bit of thinking through it, walking through it mentally to figure out how to do it right and make it sound good.
Yeah, and you and I were spoiled in the sense that we had spent most of our teenage buying these killer albums, right? Like, I don't know, like Parliament or, I don't know, Commodores or whatever, just Eagles and Pink Floyd, and we'd sit there and listen to these albums on these big sound systems that we'd built.
Mm-hmm.
And you could hear every little tiny thing,
Yep.
in those amazing recordings of those major albums. So we'd gotten accustomed to great sound, right, and great production.
Yeah. And trying to figure out how they did it.
Right.
And that's the secret is, most people figure they just go in and bing, 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 knock out an album. No, you got to think how these guys in the past that had these $1 million budgets or whatever, how did they do it?
Yeah.
How did they make that sound work with, and put it together and you have, it's a mental exercise. Yeah. And even today, when you and I are working on music projects, it's still a mental exercise. How are we going to get there? Yep. It's faster because we know how to do it now.
Yep.
But back then it was like, okay, how did they do this?
Well, and having a like I said, that keyboard, some a sequencer and a drum machine and the 16-track reel-to-reel that we got and all that was great. We had the basics. But going from there to, that big album production sound that we loved, there's quite a jump there.
A huge leap. Yeah.
And going from live sound, which is one thing, to recorded sound.
Yeah. and knowing you only have 15 tracks. We had a 16 track, but we only have 15 tracks to put live stuff on. Okay, but our stuff was so much more complex than that.
Yes.
Than 15. 15 scratches the surface.
Right, right. And
You know.
at first we were so glad to have 16, right? That was a big deal. But then we realized pretty quickly that we're going to outgrow that, and so
Within a few weeks, we were like, we need more tracks.
more tracks, more tracks.
No one's going to give us any more money to buy bigger machines.
Right.
And the only step up above that at that time was a 24 track, which we would have outgrown that thing in a matter of a few weeks too. So anyway, so then there was the try to figure out how do we make this all work.
Yeah. So we striped the 16th track with the SMPTE, right?
Yep.
The SMPTE time code thing, and that linked to a thing called a MIDI clock, or MTC something or rather. I can't remember the name of it. Which then that would trigger the keyboards and drum machines that we had. And so we were able to keep the keyboard sounds and some of the drum sampled sounds
Locked in with everything else.
Yeah, and they didn't have to be committed to analog tape.
Yep. Well, before we go any farther, let me end this episode. We've already gone 25 minutes.
Wow!
And then we're going to move on and we're going to play our very first, what do you want to call it? Song that we decided to throw everything into, and then we'll talk about it. But until then, Talbot, take it away.
This is the Craig L. Hayes Show.
My goodness, I sound so professional.
I was trying to get this thing to go to the next page, but while it's recording, it won't move. The page won't move, so I'm trying to figure out how am I going to do this.